Welcome to the Off the Charts Football Podcast. I'm Matt Manocherian, former NFL scout and currently of Sports Info Solutions, joined by Aaron Schatz, the godfather of football analytics and the founder of Football Outsiders. A special thank you to our producer, Justin Stein, as always, on the controls. And the season is here, and we got a Schefter bomb right as we started recording. Aaron, it sounds like Antonio Brown, the latest chapter is that he's not going to play. He's suspended by the team. What is going on?
By the time you hear this podcast, you will know exactly what is going on. But Adam Schefter has just tweeted as we begin recording that Mayock and Brown got into it on Wednesday, and the Raiders are now planning to suspend Brown. Who knows for how long? Of course, Brown posted that fine letter on social media yesterday that the Raiders fined him for the practices he missed while he was futzing around with his helmet. So, there's nothing I enjoy more, sarcastically I say, than this kind of ridiculous fine, don't fine, suspend, don't suspend. It really improves my enjoyment of the game on the field. Don't you agree?
Yeah, it's really riveting stuff when you're looking at the X's and O's and trying to figure out all the roster construction and the 53, and then you're dealing with this just craziness. Speaking of craziness, the season is here, and I am very excited for one team, and I'm surprised to say this. I'm excited to watch the Lions this year, and I will tell you why. Because I know two people, Aaron Schatz and Bryce Rossler, two very good friends of mine, good football analysts. Bryce is a Lions fan who thinks that the Lions are going to be mediocre this year and has some cognitive dissonance about what's going on there. And Aaron, I saw your projections came out, and you have the Lions begrudgingly edging out the other teams in the very close NFC North. And I know that you hate it because you don't believe it for one bit. So all of the kind of ambivalence and cognitive dissonance going around with the Lions, I can't wait to see how that one unfolds.
I really liked projecting the Lions to go 8-8 and being like, we are higher on the Lions than everyone else. They're going to be a playoff contender for a wild card. I don't like projecting them to win the division. So I'm not happy that there was a few different changes in the starting lineup in Green Bay that affect a few different little variables in our system and moved Green Bay down, and then that put Detroit number one. But Detroit still has only 8.3 average wins, which it just happens beats out Green Bay at 8.2 and Chicago and Minnesota at 8.0. And I also happen to think that our system is underrating the Vikings. So, I'm not exactly pleased, but I guess, I'll run a victory lap if the Lions actually make the playoffs this year. I'll run a victory lap if the Lions go 7-9 this year.
Yeah, and it's worth mentioning, too, I think the Lions were still in third place in terms of DVOA, projected DVOA. It wasn't a team quality thing. It was a big schedule thing that I think was a big part of it. And I'm really just joking around because it's so tight at that point that it's not really that you're projecting that they're going to be this great juggernaut in the NFC North rather.
There are no juggernauts in the NFC North.
It'll be fun to watch because I think there are a lot of differing opinions on what's going on there. What else? What are you looking forward to this year? Anything besides Antonio Brown maybe not playing?
I'm looking forward to the things that I'm always looking forward to. I'm looking forward to being right about certain teams. I'm looking forward to being completely wrong about certain teams. I'm looking forward to the teams that come out of nowhere to surprise and the units that put up historic performances when you thought they would be good, but you didn't realize how good. I'm looking forward to seeing just how much Patrick Mahomes can do in his second year as a starter, given that his first year was so incredible. I'm looking forward to see if Aaron Rodgers can get his career back. I'm looking forward to see if the Patriots can do it again. I can't imagine celebrating another Super Bowl championship, but maybe we will.
I love how Aaron Rodgers, he threw like 3 interceptions all year last year playing on one leg. And we're like, can he get his career back? But I guess such is the state of the analytics conversation about Aaron on Twitter these days. I'm excited for all that stuff too. And I'm excited for seeing how the analytic trends that have been discussed more and more over the offseason, like play action and aggressiveness, how much these things, like in years past, we've talked about going for it on fourth down more often, and we've seen teams start to go for it more often on fourth down. Will we see an increase in play action rate? Who are the stubborn teams that refuse to show an increase that zig where other teams zag. Anything the Patriots doing is interesting. So I'll be looking out for those early trends in week one that, in the field between the 20s on first and second down, what are teams trying to do in the first three quarters?
I'm fascinated by play action versus shotgun because we know that shotgun is more efficient and we know that play action is more efficient, but play action is more efficient under center. So it's almost like you have two directions you can go if you want to be a high-flying offense. You can go the under center play action route. That's the Rams route. That's the Patriots route now. Or you can go the spread offense, but less play action route. That is the Kansas City Chiefs route.
Yeah, and certainly the Arizona Cardinals.
I'm very much looking forward to the Arizona Cardinals. This is going to be a really interesting to see how that offensive scheme works, knowing that, you have to have sort of tempered expectations because they're not starting with a bunch of veterans, right? They're starting with youngsters and they don't necessarily have the most current talent. I mean, they're probably going to be starting Michael Crabtree at age 32 and Larry Fitzgerald, who is a great Hall of Famer, but is 38 now. But then on the other side, they're going to have a 6th round rookie probably starting for them in Keyshawn Johnson. But just seeing what they do with that scheme and what it looks like, I will say our word of mouth offensive line column, the Arizona Cardinals are one of the teams that he is going to cover this year because of the scheme.
Fascinating. All right, well, let's get into our kind of usual in-season podcast mode. This was the first time that we kept the podcast going all off-season long, and we're going to continue during the season having guests on when we can and changing it up a little bit more. But we are getting back to our bread and butter today, where in the Off the Charts Football Podcast in season, we are talking about the most important games of the week as predicted by Football Outsiders in terms of playoff odds, so what games are having the most impact on playoff odds, and getting to the Super Bowl, which games are having the most impact on the percentage that teams can get to the Super Bowl. So these odds will obviously change throughout the season for all the given teams as we start to find out, hey, the Giants are actually pretty good. We didn't think they were going to be good at all this year, so these games are mattering more, or somebody actually isn't very good that we expected to be a contender early on. So with that sort of background, we can get into the most important games of the week, sort of. Aaron, what can you tell us about that rundown this week?
Yeah, the most important game of the week was the opening night game of Thursday night between Green Bay and Chicago. And since we know that some people will be listening to this podcast on Friday and Saturday rather than Thursday, we're going to skip that game and we're going to talk about 3 other games. The first game we're going to talk about, and again, early on in the season, a lot of these most important games are going to be divisional games because obviously division wins and losses significantly count for the playoffs. So our most important Sunday game is the New York Giants at the Dallas Cowboys. Dallas is in the playoffs in 57% of our sims with a win, 31% with a loss. The Giants, 38% with a win, 16% with a loss. So all it takes when things are so close at the start of the season, all it takes for the Giants to be a better playoff contender than Dallas is one road win in Dallas.
Road division wins, hard to argue with that. But heading into it, I think we're expecting Dallas, and I think there's a lot of pressure on the Cowboys to win this game. It's appropriate that I think it's the first game we're talking about for its impact on playoff odds, because I don't think they can afford to lose at home in the division to start the season with what their offseason has been. I think regardless of how much Ezekiel Elliott we get, they need to find a way to win to avoid kind of the psychological ramifications of losing. And what I'm keeping an eye on here is Kellen Moore. I think this is a colossal game for Kellen Moore, his first game calling plays ever in his career. But if the buzz is accurate on him, and what I hear from people that are tapped into league circles is that it's been a very creative offense, that there's much more going on than what we've seen in the past out of the Cowboys, kind of keeping it vanilla. And I'm excited if you start to think about this offense behind that offensive line, if those guys can return to health and get that offensive line back to healthy form now, with Kellen Moore bringing some more creativity to the office, I think it could be really exciting. But like I said right at the beginning, if it goes in the other direction and this team loses to the Giants at home in week 1, if the offense struggles with or without Zeke, I think that the heat's going to be on Kellen Moore really quickly.
I think that's true. I expect the Dallas offense to be better this year than last year. scheme changes do tend to send teams back a little bit, but I don't know just how much of a scheme change it is. I mean, Kellen Moore's been there for a couple of years. People asked me when we posted our DVOA projections on Outsiders why we have Dallas so much better than their DVOA from last year. Last year, we said they were basically an overrated team. They were only 21st in our ratings despite being a playoff team. And this year, they're like 12th or something in the projected ratings. And the reason why is rebound on offense. I mean, you have the plexiglass principle. Teams that decline significantly tend to rebound. And this is a team that was third on offense in 2016, 10th in 2017, but dropped to 24th last year. When you add in the return of Travis Frederick and the amount of offensive line continuity that they have, which becomes, more important with Frederick back, we have their offense rebounding. And so I'm also interested to see what Kellen Moore does it. And one of the debates on analytics Twitter over the last few days regarding the Ezekiel Elliott contract is, does paying a back like Ezekiel Elliott impact your play calling to do something that we know is less efficient, which is to run the ball more on early downs rather than having a high pass run ratio? So I'm curious, just because they have Ezekiel Elliott in the fold, will they adjust their pass run ratio and still pass a little bit more than they have in the past, despite having Zeke still there?
Well, I believe in that from like a fantasy standpoint, which I think is where a lot of this analysis, is coming from for better or worse. But I think people think about things from that vantage point a lot more often than they think about things from the usage of the players and what Ezekiel Elliott allows you to do in the passing game, which I think is also going to be an impact, and separating out the causality of, you decide to sign a player, so then how you decide to use them. But for sure, I'll buy into, I thought Saquon Barkley was a safe pick in fantasy last year because you knew Gettleman was going to try to use him to be successful. I think Josh Jacobs is a safe pick this year because Gruden's going to try to find a way to get Jacobs the ball and make him look like he made a smart pick. So I think to the extent that that's true, yeah, I'm with you there. But I think to isolate that as like the thing that we want to focus on in the Ezekiel Elliott contract is maybe not the most relevant.
It is relevant because what Dallas's offensive scheme is going to be will affect how good they are on offense.
Right, but don't you think they decided what their offensive scheme was going to be before Ezekiel Elliott existed? And then that's
the question, right? If Tony Pollard was their running back in week 1, would they run as much as they will with Ezekiel Elliott as their running back in week 1?
So is the argument now that it's actually better to have a less talented running back because then psychologically you're going to pass more and that's actually good for your team? That can't be how far we're going with this, is it? I'm not.
That has been an argument on the interwebs.
I like nuance as much as anybody in the running backs don't matter argument, because I think the reason that rubs so many people the wrong way is because the don't matter part of it. It's like if anybody wanted to say running backs matter less than people thought that they mattered years ago, or that it's a diminishing value of running backs, but the whole don't matter thing, any person that I think has a grounding in football and has been around a team, has been around it, I think that it's going to rub you the wrong way because it's kind of an intentionally trollish way to approach the conversation.
I don't know. I've been having a little bit of an argument on Twitter and even more in person when we see each other at Gillette Stadium with Matt Chatham about this. People know Matt as one of the people who writes about the Patriots, and he played for the Patriots in the first 3 Super Bowls. He was a linebacker and a special teams player. And he talks about, how much as a defensive player, a player like Elliott scares you. But I think trying to get into the head of if you're an off-ball linebacker, of course you're thinking more about the running back than you are about the offensive linemen who are opening holes for him, because your job is to tackle the running back. You're not thinking about how the play develops. You're thinking about, I need to get to the guy with the ball and get him.
I'm less convinced by the opinion of an outside linebacker than I am of the opinion of the outside linebacker, the middle linebacker, the defensive lineman, the defensive end, the corner, the safety, the defensive coach. It's not just when you look at it from one perspective, from a quote unquote football perspective, that you look at it this way. I love the question that Chase from a football perspective asked online, which is, where do you rank running backs? Like in the 22 positions, where do they rank on your scale? And I'm with anybody who wants to say they're on the lower end of that scale. But I just think we need to pump our brakes a little bit sometimes. Speaking of running backs, the Giants, from their perspective, I think this one's kind of funny because I think they want anything but a close loss. I think a close loss means the longest Eli drawn out trajectory, whereas you love to beat the Cowboys. Sure, that's great. But I think getting whooped kind of gets you closer to Daniel Jones. My concern from the Giants right now is that Gettleman might have done just enough right, along with all of he's done colossally wrong, that they could kind of tread in no man's land of mediocrity and being a 6 to 8 win team, which is really the worst place to be in any sport, in the modern tanking era.
Our projections basically have them there as the most likely result. Remember, they were like 15th or something in DVOA last year, despite being 5-11. So we had them as the opposite of Dallas last year. We had them as a team whose record severely underrated how well they played. And so that would suggest that they're going to be better this year than they were last year. But the problems that they've had with the roster in the offseason would suggest that certainly a decline. There has not been a replacement of Odell Beckham, especially with Golden Tate suspended for the first 4 weeks.
Yeah, their outside receiver situation is tough to wrap your head around. I don't think we're expecting a ton from them, but there is something worthwhile in there that in DVOA last year, the Giants came out ahead of the Cowboys, despite what we all think of those two teams as we look ahead into the 2019 season.
Last year, yes, the Giants came out a little bit ahead of Dallas, but everything we know about rebounds and about the players that Dallas is getting, Frederick coming back and a full year of Cooper and the players that the Giants have lost, everything we know about these teams going into this year suggests that the Cowboys will be the better team than the Giants in 2019.
Sports Info Solutions is excited to announce the launch of its public-facing site, SISDataHub.com. The new SIS Data Hub is free for all to use and features player pages and some of the most detailed information available. In addition to all of the standard statistics, here you'll find proprietary data collected by SIS video scouts, like on-target percentage for quarterbacks, directional yards per carry for running backs, and pressure rates for edge rushers. You'll also find advanced metrics calculated from all of that advanced data, like independent quarterback rating, total points earned, and total points saved, which are detailed on the glossary on the site. A pro version of the Data Hub is also available, which contains everything from the free version, as well as filters to split by situation, personnel, and almost anything else imaginable. The Data Hub Pro also includes team leaderboards, NCAA data, and the ability to download all data as CSV files. You can visit the free Data Hub at SISDataHub.com today, or you can register for a free trial of the Data Hub Pro at pro.sisdatahub.com. Let's move ahead and talk about our next most important game of the week. Aaron, what does the Football Outsiders rankings have for us there?
That would be the LA Rams at the Carolina Panthers. The Rams, 72% playoffs with a win, 50% with a loss. Carolina, 47% with a win, 26% with a loss. And just looking at the matchup in this game, I thought the most interesting thing was that these were two of our top 5 defenses last year at covering running backs in the receiving game. And these are two of the running backs who are used in the receiving game more than any others.
Strength against strength there. And I think that matches up when you look at it from a personnel standpoint. The big thing I'm looking at from the Rams in this game, week 1, is finding out what they're going to be from a personnel perspective this year. Is this going to be the same team that ran basically all 11 personnel throughout the entire year, even after Cooper Kupp went out and it wasn't as successful? Do they bring him back and go straight to that strategy, or will they utilize more 12 throughout the season to create some more diversity in their offense? Similar question to that. Like everybody else, what will the split between Gurley and Henderson look like? Those two kind of usage questions are the big things that I'm keeping my eye on from the Rams this weekend.
Do you have any thoughts on the announced gigantic contract extension that makes Tyler Higbee one of the top 10 best paid tight ends in the league?
I did not see that. That's interesting. That I think tells you something about what their plans are for him, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I always think of Everett as their number 1 tight end, but he's not. Everett is the tight end who's used more in the passing game. Higbee is primarily a blocker, but they run so much out of 11 personnel with Higbee as the tight end. I just don't know. Could any blocking tight end be good enough to be worth that a top 10 contract? How much do you value the blocking of tight ends versus what you value as the receiving of tight ends. And I feel like I asked about this because this contract was this morning, but I'm burying the lead here. I should really be asking you what you think about Jared Goff signing a gigantic extension versus the argument that some people like Doug Farrar have made that what the Rams should have done is traded Goff and drafted another rookie quarterback and depended on Sean McVay to just develop rookies and continually have that salary cap bonus of having a quarterback on a rookie contract at all times.
I think that's a fun strategy, but finding a quarterback's hard. And even though I think Sean McVay deserves all the credit for turning Jared Goff's career around, really, I still have to say, I think you've got the guy in there, you're functional. You pay the guy. If you think he's a reason why you're winning games, you got to pay him. And it seems to me like they think he's a big reason why they're winning games. It's not as easy to just draft somebody and plug somebody in there. But heck, yeah, if you could guarantee that Sean McVay is going to be able to make anybody at least mediocre, that's a fun way to build a team. You could get some all kinds of pieces around them.
You can't. That's the thing, is you can't guarantee that the quarterback that you draft would end up being good. You would have to trust that McVay's scheme, in other words, that they're winning more because of the scheme than the quarterback. The quarterback does a very good job, though, of putting the scheme into effect. I mean, you have to acknowledge that. But, I mean, I think the thing I would worry about with Goff is this idea that McVay is in his helmet until late in every down. And that teams, what the Patriots did was that by adjusting their defense really late in the process of each down, they got Goff a little confused. Will teams pick that up and start doing that against the Rams this year?
Right. It'll be interesting to look to see how that kind of progresses this year, if teams can get at him that way. With quarterback tiers, I always think of it in terms of guys that you win because of, your Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers, guys that you win with, and then guys that you win in spite of, and then guys that you can't win with. And really, I think when you get a win because of quarterback, that's the ultimate, that's the holy grail. I don't think that's what Jared Goff is, but I think you do pay the win with quarterback. You don't pay the win in spite of quarterback. I think the win in spite of quarterback is your Mariota, Ryan Tannehill, where you're really having to build a lot of things around this person to have to win because of them. It's Joe Flacco. And the mistake that the Ravens made on the last Joe Flacco contract was paying him like a win with quarterback as opposed to a win in spite of quarterback, which is what I really think what he was, and that's what set them back. I think that what Goff got is what the going rate's going to be for a win with quarterback, and I would think that he at least meets that threshold. I don't think he's a win because of guy, but I do think he's a guy you can comfortably win with.
I will say that Kevin Cole from Pro Football Focus argues that quarterbacks, that even at the current astronomical rates that they're being paid, the quarterbacks are essentially underpaid based on their value in what they bring you in wins and points versus what players at other positions bring you in wins and points. I
think there's no doubt about it. I mean, we have a maximum contract in basketball that sets a cap on that.
Artificial cap, yeah.
You have the franchise tag. So the franchise tag, to some extent, is going to control the highest salaries in the league, which are quarterbacks, just by giving that little piece of leverage. If it were a pure free market, those guys will get paid even more.
The other thing about the Rams at Panthers game, I think, to watch is the Panthers defense, which we think of as a good defense and really wasn't last year. And can it get back its mojo? They were 22nd in DVOA last year. They were 17th in the first half of the year, but then 28th in the second half of the year. We all know that the Panthers offense declined because of injuries to Cam Newton, but there's no easy explanation for what happened to the Panthers defense and why it was only 22nd for the full year. Obviously, the Rams are not a great offense to start with to look good in conventional numbers, but, if they can keep the Rams to a reasonable amount of points, that would suggest that the Panthers defense is back a little bit.
Yeah, and as you're always pointing out that the offensive stability is going to be more than the defense, maybe there's reason to believe that the Panthers defense will improve just kind of based on that regression to the mean.
Yep.
One thing I'm looking for with them is I think they could be an underrated contender, and I'm encouraged that they've made some moves to become more of an analytically savvy team this offseason, and I want to see if we see more riverboat from Ron.
I'd love it, would love it.
The Panthers ranked 10th over the last 3 years in terms of going for it when SIS recommends, but they were down to 20th last year, even though they actually increased their rate. So what's going on there? The rest of the league increased their rate of going for it on fourth down by so much more than them on average that they actually dropped to this bottom half of the league in aggressiveness. So with them kind of catching up and getting some more analytics under their belt, I think we can expect them to have kind of a rebound year in terms of the riverboat run. And we might be able to see that guy that everybody fell in love with during that Super Bowl run start to get some of his mojo back.
Yep. And of course, the other thing, we're like this thing and the other thing and the other thing and the other thing. Cam Newton's new throwing motion.
Yeah, it's all about the shoulder. We got to see healthy Cam is the beginning and the end of it.
That's scouting, not analytics, but let's see. The analytics are the numbers that result from Cam Newton's new shoulder motion. Let's see if they're better.
Hey, as we move into football analytics looking more like baseball analytics, we might have some good analytics on the optimal shoulder throwing motion and starting to get stuff like that in the future. So that might be the realm of analytics again. So
wouldn't be surprised.
All right, and one more game this week to talk about. What is the third matchup?
The Tennessee Titans at the Cleveland Browns. Now, these percentages will sound weird to people who don't know the FO projections, because we have Cleveland lower than conventional wisdom and Tennessee higher than conventional wisdom. We have Cleveland in the playoffs, 45% with a win, 24% with a loss. Tennessee, 56% with a win, 34% with a loss. It helps that Tennessee is in an easier division because we like Pittsburgh a lot. So that and Baltimore, and that creates more competition for Cleveland.
So here's my question for you. Do you want to watch this game? Because it seems like one of the most interesting teams to watch against one of the most boring teams that I could think of to watch. And I can't figure out what my level of excitement is to actually tune into this one.
I was arguing with somebody on Twitter, which is the most boring team in the NFL right now, the Tennessee Titans or the Cincinnati Bengals?
Ooh, that's boring on boring.
I'm rooting for Mariota to get his mojo back. I've also always kind of liked Mariota as a guy, as a person. And he has declined over the last 2 years. So there's a little bit of rebound possibility there for Mariota on offense. But I'm also interested to see what Cleveland does. I mean, I do think our numbers undersell Cleveland a little bit. I do think they're better than our numbers. I do think they're a serious wild card contender, maybe even a division contender. I would definitely like to watch this game. I won't be watching this game because of the way TV works. I'll be watching the Buffalo Bills and the New York Jets. But Josh Allen running around.
Josh Allen and Sam Darnold. Yeah, there's interesting stuff to watch.
Can Josh Allen be accurate?
Historically, ouch, Jets at Bills.
Well, yeah. But this game, I will say, one of the interesting matchups is Cleveland, dead last in broken tackles in the SIS charting last year on defense. Tennessee, first in broken tackles on offense.
Yeah, they got a running back who's kind of decent.
They have two running backs who are kind of decent. Sure. One who breaks them and one who avoids them in the first place.
Yeah, big guy and little guy. So staying on that Tennessee side, I'm looking forward to seeing, back to those running backs, play action usage. I discussed it a little bit at the top of the podcast, but I'm really looking around week one at everybody, trying to see who's going to more play action, who's being really overt about what they're trying to do this year. And so I'm keeping an eye on the Titans, especially because last year they were one of the top teams in the league in play action usage. And there's obviously something to be seen in Green Bay as LaFleur and Rodgers get together. And we've all discussed that kind of aspect of the play action. But I'm curious, with LaFleur leaving, what Tennessee will look like, which direction the Titans go in from a play action standpoint. I still lack confidence in Mariota in the drop back game. So I think they need to rely on that and rely on those running backs creating broken tackles in the run game, more so than being able to be a drop back team. So that's one thing that I'm definitely keeping an eye on when it comes to the Titans.
I think the other thing to watch with the Browns is everyone believes that their weakness on offense is the offensive line. Is it really their weakness, though? I mean, it may be their weakness, but how weak is it? They were 11th last year in pressure rate allowed. And yes, pressure rate has a lot to do with the quarterback, but still it has something to do with the offensive line. And the Browns were also very good in ESPN's pass block win rate stat. So is this really a weakness? I mean, yes, we can say the words Greg Robinson, but how much of a weakness is this really?
And I think that's the question that's going to define the Browns season more than anything. I'm a big believer in building through the offensive line, and I think looking at their offensive line, I think, looking at their roster construction, you're worried about, okay, can all these pieces kind of gel together? Is this kind of that old Eagles dream team type thing where things can go wrong, building through a lot of different free agent pieces and trades and things like that? But I think more specifically, the offensive line is the question. And when you look on the interior of the offensive line, the first place that you want to build with a shorter quarterback like Mayfield, who I've always compared to Breeze, you want to build that guard, center guard. And I think they're pretty strong up the middle. If I'm thinking off the top of my head, but I know Bitonio is there. I think Treader is in the center. The right guard that they got from the NFC.
Well, they lost Zeitler, so now it's a youngster, I believe, at right guard.
But I think here, I'm trying to pull up my roster here. But the questions are the tackles, is what I'm getting to. Chris Hubbard on the right side had 22 blown blocks last year, including 16 in pass protection, resulting in 12 sacks, according to SISDataHub.com. So that's 12 sacks is a lot of sacks to give up. It's the full season, but that's a problem there. And then on the left side, Greg Robinson only played half of the season, but had 11 blown blocks in addition to 8 penalties, including 5 holds. So that's averaging a blown block and a penalty every game, or a hold every other game. Just not good. So those two guys, I think, are rightfully the question marks for the Browns. And that'll be what I think ends up dictating if they are a playoff team or not.
Yep, I agree with you. It's going to be but I also think that their defense, and especially the health of their defense, that is a defense that is very top-heavy without a lot of depth.
Right. Throughout the roster, they really are built that way this year. And Eric Kush, who I was thinking of at right guard, coming over there from Chicago.
Right. Corbett, who's the youngster from last year that they wanted to, has not won that job.
Interesting. All right. Well, I think we covered those 3 games pretty well.
I'm ready for week 1, my man.
All right. Well, thank you to our listeners, as always, for tuning in. Please help us to spread the word about the Off the Charts Football Podcast by subscribing, rating, and writing reviews. Hit us up on Twitter at sportsinfo_SIS, at FB Outsiders. I'm at Matt Mano, and he's at FO_A Shots. For my co-host Aaron Schatz and our producer Justin Stein, I'm Matt Manocherian, and thank you for joining us for the latest episode of the Off the Charts Football Podcast.